Started? All right. Well, thank you all for being here today to mark this very important moment. Yesterday, the Pennsylvania Senate passed legislation to make Pennsylvania schools phone free. And I don't know if this press conference is phone free.
It's in my pocket.
That's right. But I'm so glad to stand alongside my colleagues, Senator Hughes and Senator Sanacero, the PSEA and Pennsylvania Unplugged, to celebrate yesterday's crucial vote. As I said on the floor yesterday, time and attention are our most precious resources. That is especially true for our students who spend hours in a classroom to learn the necessary skills to become successful members of society. But phones are designed to capture and monetize our time and attention. The more time we spend on these addictive devices, the more money a tech company or app developer makes. Jonathan Haidt calls phones experience blockers, that they connect you with people far away while disconnecting you from the people and experiences right in front of you. Like a student in math class who should be learning algebra, but is instead checking his or her phone for notifications. Or a student at lunch who is sitting next to her friends, but has her head down in their phone communicating with someone miles away. While this attention is being monetized by tech moguls, they are missing lessons being taught and the interactions they could be having with classmates and others to grow their knowledge and develop their skills. We are spending nearly $12 billion here in Pennsylvania on K through 12 education in this year alone. But we'll be flushing it down the drain if we can't recapture our students' attention. Teens spend an average of 8 hours on their phones each day, and a study from last year found that on average, teens are spending 1.5 hours on their phones during school hours. That's a quarter of the school day. We need to step in. We cannot allow our investment into education be robbed by the tech moguls who are stealing our students' attention. Our schools are for learning, and our kids need a break from these devices. For that reason, our bill would prohibit students from using cell phones during the school day. We know that students do better academically, mentally, and socially when they get a break from these addictive devices in school. Nearly 20 states have already banned phones throughout the entire school day, and several other states are working to do the same. This is no longer an experiment. We know from countless studies and data that it has brought positive change to the schools in those 20 states and for the students attending them. Thank you to the many stakeholders, teachers, parents, students, my friends and colleagues in the Senate, and especially to those standing up here with me today. PSEA, thank you. PA Unplugged, thank you. Senator Hughes, Senator Sanacero, I thank you for your partnership, for working with me in true bipartisan spirit for the well-being and future of our kids. Now we turn our attention to the House and call on them to take up this bill to recapture our kids' attention and ensure our investment in education is truly realized by making our schools phone-free. Thank you. Now I would like to introduce my colleague and co-prime sponsor of the Senate Bill 1014, Senator Hughes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And what a great suit.
Okay.
Right?
Wow, thank you. Let me thank my colleagues and who worked in a bipartisan fashion to get this done. I'd like to thank all the staff, of course, leading with my Chief Counsel Mike Deary for working in such a collaborative fashion to get us to this moment, and all of the organizations that have come together to see this as a priority and to get this through the Pennsylvania Senate and then to get it to the House. We are spending unprecedented dollars in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania at the directive of the Commonwealth Court President Judge's decision, which came down on February 7, 2023, to constitutionally, adequately, and equitably fund our schools, unprecedented dollars. But those dollars wind up being meaningless if our children are distracted in that class time and not given the opportunity to concentrate and develop the effective teacher-learner relationships that our teachers are providing. I have visited numerous schools in all kinds of school districts, and been to all kinds of classrooms, and have had all kinds of conversations with teachers. Not the play ones from Abbott Elementary, but you know, it's called a shameless plug. Right? Not the play ones from Abbott Elementary, but the real ones in all kinds of schools all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And they say that second to the challenges of pay and working conditions is the issue of the distractions that our students have in the classrooms as a result of cell phones. But let me run through some of the numbers. 72% of U.S. high school teachers say cell phone distraction is a major problem in the classroom. I want to repeat that. 72% of U.S. high school teachers say cell phone distraction is a major problem in the classroom. Since the early 2010s, when smartphone ownership among teens skyrocketed from 23% to 73%, rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide among adolescents have surged. The suicide rate for children ages 10 to 14 has tripled since 2007. Half of all teens say they have experienced cyberbullying at least once. A 2025 Pew Research Center survey found that 74% of U.S. adults now support banning middle and high school students from using cell phones during class, up from 68% just last fall. A 2025 study published in the Journal of Human Development and Capabilities found that children who receive smartphones before 13 are significantly more likely to experience serious mental health problems in early adulthood, including aggression, emotional instability, and suicidal thoughts. These are some of just the numbers, some of the data points that have driven us to put this legislation together and work so hard across the aisle and work effectively and have put us in a position to garner very public support from Governor Josh Shapiro. This is something that we need to get all the way home. We owe it to our children to give them the environment where that classroom time, that bell-to-bell experience is maximized by them, and we owe it to those who have the responsibility to educate them, our hard-working teachers, to allow them to practice their craft and to do their work, the art of teaching, which is as much art as it is science. We need to give them the environment to do that. We cannot waste these new resources that we're putting into our schools. We must maximize them, and this is an important way to maximize the talent that we know that our children possess. So I want to thank my colleagues. I want to thank all the advocacy groups that have come together. I want to thank the staff that have come together. Let's get this done, and let's get this done sooner rather than later. And you're going to introduce?
You can.
Okay, thank you so very much. All right. From the great, here you go, Steve. From the great state of Bucks County, Pennsylvania, please welcome Senator Steve Sanacero.
Thanks. Thank you, Senator Hughes, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Devlin Robinson, my two colleagues who have been such great partners in this endeavor. And of course, I want to repeat what Devlin said at the outset. I want to thank PSEA, my former union as a former member, and PA Unplugged, and so many other advocates, grassroots advocates across Pennsylvania who have been and continue to fight for this, and obviously our staffs as well for the good work that you've all done in getting us to this point. So I have one of these. It's not mine. I'm not going to out who gave it to me, but I do like the flowers on the back,
Yeah,
though.
I see that.
And I have it here as a prop to make a point. About 25, 26 years ago, I read an article about Steve Jobs, then with Apple, about what he was working on. And the project involved what he described as creating a handheld computer. That's this. That became the first smartphone, the first Apple smartphone. They're not phones. Sure, you can make a phone call with them. But frankly, very few students in our K through 12 system who have these use them as phones. And I think most of us as parents know that because I've got children in their 20s and they hardly ever use this as a phone. These are handheld computers. And, you know, Jobs' thought at that time was it would be wonderful if we could give people this access to what was then the burgeoning internet and all the information that it entailed, and it could be at their fingertips at all times. What we're dealing with today are the unintended consequences of that vision. Because I think we can all agree there's so much about that vision that can be constructive and good for our society. But what we have discovered, particularly in these last 15, 16 years, as Vince has outlined in some of the statistics that he talked about, is that this can actually create problems as well. Because when you combine this handheld computer with what Jobs was not, frankly, contemplating at that time, which is social media, and then a number of software apps that have been and continue to be developed that were designed specifically to be addictive, you create the perfect storm for problems, not just for kids, but frankly for adults too, but particularly problematic for kids. Because as kids are growing, and what we know about the growth process, and we know about the different connections that are happening in their brains, to have this constant distraction causes major problems with that process. But then we also know the very real reality and why, you know, teachers are, and I knew as a former teacher myself, it was a no-brainer that teachers would support this because we see in the classrooms, and I saw it 17 years ago before we had so-called smartphones and we only had flip phones, they're distracting. So to have kids actually be able to pay attention in class, to absorb what's happening in class and learn, this can be a huge impediment. But more than that, it can be an obstacle to that other piece of learning at that stage in your life, which is forming those relationships with other human beings, working how to navigate the problems, personal relationships, but in our careers as well. And that's something that this technology and the unintended consequence of that vision that Jobs had years ago is disrupting. And it's a reason why merely saying, no, you can't use it during instructional period is not enough. Because those hours, the minutes between classes and the time spent in recess or in the cafeteria at lunch, that's time when young people need to be talking to each other. They need to be having those relationships. And saying that from bell to bell, you're not using it, is what will enable them to do that. Now, I've mentioned publicly before, and I won't identify this young man, but one of my staff members has a 14-year-old who, when his mom told him that I was getting behind this bill, he said, Mom, if that bill passes, I'm never voting for Steve. I understand a lot of the students, including two who came and testified at a hearing we had a few months ago on this topic generally, are not enthusiastic about it. But here's the really amazing thing. In those schools right here in Pennsylvania, where some form of this policy has already been adopted, whether it's true bell to bell or just during instruction time, not only have the teachers said it's miraculous, it's really changed the environment, but the students have as well. Their response has been, it's taken a weight off of them. It's enabled them to live in the moment and not in this virtual world. And that's why this is so important. I know a lot of people have said, well, it's only school time, and where are they going to learn to use these properly? Well, families are not out of the equation. We can pass laws here in Harrisburg that pertain to our educational institutions, as we have on so many other things, by the way. So the argument that, we're acting heavy-handedly just doesn't hold water, because we pass laws on all kinds of things, like how many days the kids have to go to school, what's the general curriculum going to be, how old do you have to be when you start school? All those things, the state has decided it's important as a matter of policy that we should pass those things. This is no different. But not only is it important for us to do it from a policy perspective, but to give these kids this opportunity in school to have time where it's not part of their lives. And it's incumbent on families, to the extent that there is this need to teach kids how responsibly to interact on the internet and to use this technology. That's something they have to do. That doesn't take any of us who are parents or caregivers off the hook. Merely what we're saying is, when they're in the classes, when they're in these school buildings, this is going to be an environment where they're focusing on education and growing as young people. And that's the gift that I think this bill can give to them. That's what so many other states have recognized and stepped up to do. And I'm hoping that Pennsylvania will take that next step. We've obviously taken an important step in that direction yesterday by passing the bill out of the state Senate. But now we have to get it through the House to get to the governor's desk. And the governor made it loud and clear yesterday that if it does, he's going to sign it into law. So my request to anyone watching this press conference today is this: reach out to your representatives. Reach out to your school boards. And if you're a school board member, and we know some, let your school boards association know where you stand. Because I've heard from a lot of school board members in Bucks County who have told me unequivocally, thank you. Thank you for doing this. This is important for our kids. And it's important that the state step up and set this policy for all of Pennsylvania. So I'm excited, but this is just step one. We have a lot of work to do. Let's get this done. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jeff Nye. I am the Vice President of the Pennsylvania State Education Association and a classroom teacher for the past 28 years. On behalf of our educators and support professionals across Pennsylvania, I want to thank Senator Robinson, Senator Hughes, and Senator Nacero for passing this legislation. Thank you for your leadership and your commitment to doing what is right for Pennsylvania's 1.7 million students. And thank you for the bipartisan coalition of senators who voted in support of Senate Bill 1014. The bill establishes a statewide expectation that public schools will restrict possession and prohibit the use of mobile devices for students during the school day. Importantly, this bill leaves it up to each individual school entity to decide exactly how those restrictions will be implemented. School communities across the Commonwealth will have to come together, educators, parents, and students, to work collaboratively on student mobile device policies. It's not going to be easy, because no big changes ever are. We're here today taking on this difficult task because it's the right thing to do for our kids. Pennsylvania's educators have long known that the easy student access to personal smartphones, smartwatches, and tablets is a problem in our schools. These mobile devices disrupt classroom lessons. They distract students from learning, and they facilitate cyberbullying. Establishing an expectation that these devices must be put away when the bell rings will empower students to focus on their learning, to connect with each other, and to develop critical, important interpersonal skills. That's why, as Senator Robinson said, 28 states currently have laws restricting student use of cell phones and mobile devices during the school days, including 19 states that do it bell to bell. Several school districts here in Pennsylvania have already adopted these similar policies, and by all reports, students in these schools are interacting with each other even more. There is more conversation, more laughter during our lunch periods, and classroom disruptions and discipline referrals have declined. Senate Bill 1014 now heads to the House of Representatives, and PSEA urges the House to take up this bill, pass it, and send it to Governor Shapiro's desk for his signature. Then, together, we can begin the hard work of putting this bill into practice. There is no doubt it will be an adjustment for students, for educators, and for parents. But we know this is the right thing to do for our kids, for their overall well-being, and for their academic success. And there is nothing more important than that. So thank you very much for being here, and I turn it back over, Senator.
Hello, my name is Kelly Marsh. I'm here today as a mother of three outside of Pittsburgh, as well as one of the co-leads of Pennsylvania Unplugged, a growing grassroots coalition of parents and caregivers across our state working towards a cultural shift in the way with which we approach screens and social media with our kids. We are thankful to both the senators that sponsored this bill, as well as the Senate from yesterday, for agreeing that it is time for Pennsylvania to join the 19 other states to pass legislation for bell-to-bell phone-free schools, and have done so in such an overwhelmingly bipartisan way. We hear from thousands of families across the Commonwealth that distraction-free schools are a priority. We want to ensure that Pennsylvania not only passes legislation on this issue, but it is with the gold standard best practice, and that is with bell-to-bell policies. Educators, school safety experts, behavioral psychologists, and empirical evidence are clear. Restricting these devices, not just when the teacher is talking, is what's best for students, what keeps them the safest, is what's best for their mental health, and restores the culture in the school. Learning happens throughout the entire school day, and we have to think about what the time spent on these phones is replacing. By removing the constant pool of these devices, we are giving students back their ability to focus, access their creativity, and opportunities to build human connections and real-world experiences. As we have heard, and yet another study a few weeks ago came out in this space on with the same results. The average student is spending an hour or over an hour on their phones during school hours each day. This equates to almost an entire school day per week. This alone should concern any taxpayer. These devices have been engineered to capture our attention and override even our best intentions. Teachers, kids, and parents have been tasked with managing the unmanageable. It's time to recognize that our current approach isn't working. This type of legislation is an important first step for the much-needed cultural change. This is a collective action problem. Parents are learning, and we are doing the work in our homes, but we can't solve this on our own. We need the schools, communities, and governments to work alongside us to make a better world for our kids. And yesterday's result in the Senate shows that this progress is possible. Thank you.
Just winging it. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Senator Rosemary Brown, and Senator Robinson said to me, would you like to say a few words? And I said, how could I not, with the cell phone initiatives that I have put forward over the last 10, 12 years regarding hands-free cell phone legislation. And, that was an initiative that was very, very difficult, but was a focus on also getting the phone out of the hands of the driver and focusing on what the real task was, which is driving. And so, it was trying to come to that compromise on an ability to know that we have this technology, we have these cell phones, they are helpful, but also saying you have a responsibility to protect the lives of others and keep people safe. And so I look at this legislation as a very similar mentality towards the cell phone and common sense, as far as it's a great tool, which was said before. But there's limitations on what it can also, on the downside of the cell phone, and for our teachers and for our students. I think they are craving some guidance and some strength to the cell phone use within the schools. Again, to take back what the real reason to go to school is, and is to learn, and is to focus with your teacher. And part of school is learning interaction and soft skills, which we talk about often very times with our employers. And that seems to be something that has come up a lot of what we need to keep building in our schools. So this initiative is something my schools have said many of them are doing, but they did want it codified in state law. They want the strength behind it. They want to know that they have the support of the state. And I do think it will be very helpful, and there are provisions in here, as was stated, allowing how they do this to be in their through the school boards and through some of that voting, which makes it nice for them. But I do think it's something that is very productive, very common sense, definitely real world, but will make a tremendous difference in our kids' learning. And I am the co-chair of the Mental Health Caucus here in the Senate, and that's a whole nother conversation. But the mental health piece of this is directly involved with our technology, and we need to start looking at that as well. And so I think this is a very smart move. I thank the fellow senators and legislators who have supported this, and I high-fived Senator Robinson yesterday during the budget address when this came up, right? I high-fived you because I do believe in it, and I think it is very productive for our families and for our schools. So thank you all for being here today, and thank you for the sponsor of the legislation.
And so I want to thank everybody for coming out. Thanks you to all the speakers. Again, thank you to all my partners in the Senate. Now I'd like to open it up for questions.
Could you just briefly explain how this would work? Like, where are the cell phones going to go? How much control do teachers have over it? So on and so forth.
So as the bill is written and through the negotiations, we're going to leave that up to the school boards. You know, that is the local control that we want to make sure the school boards and the community has the weigh in and the buy-in to implement this policy, because they know that they're going to be the ones that are going to have to do it. So we want them to decide how best to implement that policy.
It was mentioned that Governor Shapiro has publicly supported this recently. So there's some urgency there to get this law passed. Do you have a sense of how quickly the House is going to move forward with this? Have you heard from your colleagues in the House?
Yeah, so I haven't heard from the House. You know, we only passed it yesterday. But you know, does anybody else want to weigh in?
Look, the House has a legislative process just like we do, and I think we have to respect that. And obviously, the bill first needs to go to committee and get out of committee before it gets to the floor. So I think we are respectful of that, and we will work with the House members and answer questions that they have, and try to be good advocates in that process. But we have to be respectful of their process as well. It's fantastic that this has gotten so far so quickly, and obviously we'd like to get this to the governor's desk this year. But we're also respectful of our colleagues on the other side of the building and have them work through the process, because we want to make sure all questions are answered, and that when and if the bill comes up for a vote, that people are supporting it because they understand it is exactly the right policy for Pennsylvania.
Can you talk a little bit more about the exceptions and what you considered in what should be included, what should not be included? Was there anything that you were like on the fence about including when it came to exceptions? Just a little bit more.
So we heard from a lot of stakeholders about exceptions. There were some teachers that, you know, use the cell phone in class for instruction. You know, we don't want to take that ability away for the teacher to teach students how to properly use the phone to solve certain problems. But, you know, we want them to go to the principal and the school board themselves and get that approval, so that you're creating more of an environment, some discourse into using these phones for those exceptions.
And more about like the student IEPs and other.
IEPs, English as a second language, what's that? Medical exceptions, yeah. So, again, those decisions will be made with input from the teachers, the supervisors, school board. So.
I have another question.
All right.
Something else that came up during committee was safety concerns, and during the hearing was parents saying, hey, I want to be able to contact my student during a school shooting, God forbid. Can you kind of talk a little bit about responding to that concern?
Sure, absolutely. I feel for him. I know my friend, Senator Sanacero has a story he'd like to share.
If I may, and thank you, Devlin. As I said earlier, I taught high school. I taught at Ben Salem High School. And that, around 17 years ago when I was there, so I'm dating myself, there were not the smartphones yet, but there were the flip phones. We had a situation where the school went into lockdown. And we were trained as teachers that when the school went into lockdown, you had to turn off the lights in your classroom, you had to lock the door, and put the kids off in a corner of the room where they could not be seen from the door. And that's what I did. At that time, the kids had flip phones. The lockdown lasted an hour and a half. We did not know what was going on. The kids started texting their friends. They started texting their parents. And before you knew it, there were all kinds of rumors floating around the school that there were people with guns roaming the halls of the schools. And the kids were understandably becoming hysterical, and it made my job in keeping them calm and quiet much more difficult. I ultimately had to tell them, please, you got to put those away. We've got to let the first responders and the authorities do the job they need to do, whatever the situation may be. It turns out that the lockdown happened because there was a burglary a couple of blocks away from the school. And a couple of hours later, the perpetrators involved were apprehended, and that was the end of the situation. There was never anyone inside the school who had a gun. No one ever broke into the school. And that misinformation that was disseminated via these phones caused unnecessary panic that could have resulted in further problems. And God forbid, had there actually been someone in the school, could very well have put those kids and staff in harm's way and frustrated what the first responders were trying to do. Because like the staff in the school, they were taught how to deal with those situations. So in fact, from my personal experience, these things are not helpful in those circumstances. They are an impediment to getting things done and to saving kids. Parents can find out from schools what's happening. They have that ability. If they need to get through to their child, they can do it the old-fashioned way. When we were all in school, that's how it used to work. That's how it can work again. And so I don't think that's seriously going to be a problem.
Yeah, I would add that in cases of emergencies, the students are better served listening to their teacher to get them out of harm's way instead of focusing on their phone. You had a question? That was it? Okay. Did you have a question?
Yeah, have you heard at all from the governor's office as to whether this is the product he's envisioning? When the governor says he supports a bell-to-bell phone ban, is it this bell-to-bell phone ban?
I think that he understands the legislative process is that, you know, it's supposed to move through the House and Senate, and we get the stakeholders involved, and that's kind of, you know, the finished product will go on his desk. Right?
Yeah, I mean, his team is monitored.
Right.
His team has monitored the conversations, and will continue to monitor. It's Jessica. Thank you, Jessica. Okay. His team has monitored the conversations and will continue to monitor them throughout the process, getting the best advice. But you see how quickly this went. just from a logistical standpoint, I don't think the House will be going into appropriations hearing shortly. They may not be back in the session for quite some time, but this has real impact for real people. And I don't want to make a prediction, but, as early as we're all back in together, I think is in March, all right? And that might be a good time to finish this up.
Anyone else? Anyone? Last call? No? Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody again, everybody up here. Thank you for all the due diligence and the hard work and, the late night calls and the negotiations that put this through. Yep. So thank you all, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.